So let's go back to PHP for just a second, because I want to use that language to illustrate yet another problem that also occurs in other languages. But it's nice to show it in PHP because it's so pervasively used. And it's a problem of type juggling. And the idea here is that sometimes PHP has, difficulties being consistent in the way it infers the types of variables and expressions. Okay, and as you may know, PHP is a language where you don't have to necessarily specify the type of a variable or expression because PHP will figure it out itself. Type inference. So, for instance, when you write foo equals double quote one, right, it will figure out that this is a string. Right. And then later on, when you do a multiplication of foo with 2, it will figure out, hold on, it's a multiplication, so it must be an integer. Right? So it figures out the types by itself. Question is whether it will always do this in a way that makes sense to you as a human. So in the remainder of this presentation or this video, we will, use some terminologies, and on the slides we will use, the word string for strings, and an integer or float for, specific numbers, and true and false for booleans. We'll also use the term zero-like. Zero-like means that PHP will loosely compare to int zero. So int zero is the integer value 0. It's zero-like. So what is type juggling? Well, type juggling is the name given by PHP developers to a feature in PHP to allow programmers to substitute values of one type in situations where values of another type would make more sense. Okay, and we're going to look at examples in a minute. I just want to again repeat that this is not just a feature that you only find only in PHP. You find it in other languages, but PHP is a really powerful example of this. Okay, so PHP has two types of comparison: a loose comparison and a strict comparison. So it's an equal equal or equal equal equal. Okay, and the loose comparison have some surprising um, semantics when it comes to the conversion rules. Okay, some of these are a bit weird, and let's have a look at these conversions. So first we're looking at the strict comparison. So equal equal equal. And on the top here, you see some values, and on the left column, you also see some values here, right? And we're going to compare them to each other, and then we show the result of that comparison. So if we compare, a 0 with a 0, right, it will be true, obviously. 0 equals 0, and a 0 compared to the string 0, right? So 0 in double quotes will be false. It all makes sense. This is a strict comparison. We kind of understand that. But now with a loose comparison with equal equal signs, the conversions are perhaps a little bit surprising. So here we see that if we compare 0 to 0, we still get the value true. But we get trues in a lot of other situations also. So if we compare 0 to null, we also get true. Perhaps that is not so surprising. But we also get true if we compare 0 to a 0 in double quotes, which looks like a string. Okay. We also get true if we compare 0 to false, right? Again, maybe that's somewhat expected. We get true if we compare a 0 to an empty string. Maybe you could still understand that. But now look at this one. We also get true in a really surprising situation where we compare, in a loose way, the string PHP to the value 0. The answer to that, the comparison outcome, is true also. So these are really surprising results. And these surprising results may have surprising consequences. And we're going to show this, right? So we're going to compare a string to a number, right? And then we will see that PHP will attempt to convert this string to the appropriate kind of number. For instance, if we compare a string, or at least something that's in double quotes, to an integer value 0, the result will be true, right? Likewise, if we compare this string, 0e12, to an integer value 0, the result will be true. Okay, that's a little weird, but it gets weirder when we compare one ABC in double quotes to the value 1, the integer value 1. This is also considered to be the same on the loose comparison. Likewise, 0ABC will be equivalent to an integer 0. And perhaps most bizarre of all, the string ABC, if we compare that to integer 0, the result will also be true. Isn't that surprising? But it gets weirder than that. Because if PHP thinks that the operands look like number, even if they're actually strings, it will convert them both and perform a numeric operation. So if you're comparing, for instance, this string to that string, it will be true, right? So it will try to interpret them as numbers, right? Likewise, it will consider this to be true, this 0e12345, it will interpret as a number, and it's much less than 1. Or 0e12345, it will interpret on the loose comparison to the value to be equivalent to the value of a string 1, string 0. Okay. Likewise, OXF in the string is the same as 15 as a string. Okay, so this may create significant problems, and it's of course exacerbated by the fact that the equals notation, so the notation for loose comparison, is the comparison that we have in languages such as C and many other languages as being a strict comparison. So it makes it very easy to make these kind of mistakes, right? Since this equal is the default comparison in many other languages. Now, exploiting this may not be easy because typically you cannot input type data by HTTP. You can only input strings. But sometimes there are possibilities to exploit this. So I don't know, keep an eye out for these kind of bugs also in your assignments. And by the way, this craziness in PHP is really astounding. For instance, you cannot even trust things like the less than operator to be transitive, right? So if you have A being less than B and B being less than C, you cannot conclude that A will always be less than C also. For instance, here's an example of where we have minus infinity being less than 0. This is true. Okay. 0 being less than true, also true. But minus infinity being less than true is actually false. Okay. How insane is that? In fact, you may even find that the less than operator in PHP is circular, right? So in other words, it may be the case that A is less than B, B is less than C, and C is less than A. And you see an example here on the slide. So infinity is less than an empty array. The empty array is less than new standard class, and new standard class is less than infinity. Okay, so it's a circular operation in this particular example. Now, all I want to point out is that, of course, PHP has many of these kind of things, and it's, to me, not the most elegant language that you have to program your server-side dynamic behavior in. But these kind of things may happen in other languages also. These languages are not necessarily always as well designed as we would like them to be. So keep an eye out for these kind of things and also the kind of problems, vulnerabilities that they may give rise to.